majority of the 39 West End theatres are over 100 years old. There's so much history to all of these venues. Hundreds and thousands of shows have been performed on these stages. So today, we're going to walk through all 39 West End theatres alphabetically and learn one fun fact about every one. From ghost stories to lost statues, the shortest run in West End history, and how the record was kept on the longest. Here's something you maybe didn't know about every single West End theatre. We start with the first theatre alphabetically, and a fairly dark story. I promise you these facts do get fun. Outside the Adelphi Theatre, you can find a plaque dedicated to William Terrace. His story is tragic, with his life being taken outside the Adelphi stage door. But if you're a believer in something more supernatural, William's presence at the Adelphi is larger than just his legacy and a plaque, as it is alleged that he still haunts this theatre to this day. The first London production of Tennessee Williams' classic, A Streetcar Named Desire, played at the Aldwych Theatre in 1949. This production was not only directed by Laurence Olivier, but also starred his wife, Vivien Leigh, in the role of Blanche. The Ambassador Theatre's new outdoor bar space is themed around their current tenant, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. This space is designed by the show's creator, Jethro Compton, and is full of Easter eggs from the show. These take the form of posters dotted around the walls of the bar. Some of these posters include ads for Mrs. Moncrief's tea rooms, a bear that belongs to Benjamin's daughter Loan, and Benjamin's go-to order of just beer. The Apollo Theatre is named for Apollo, the Greek god of the arts, having been originally designed as a space for musical theatre. Apollo was also the leader of the Muses, who can be seen depicted in the statues that stand at the top of the theatre's exterior. So next time you walk past the Apollo, look up. Our other West End Apollo, the Apollo Victoria, has two almost identical entrances. One on Wilton Road that features the huge wicked glitterboard, and the other on Vauxhall Bridge Road that is a lot more boring. This is one of many West End theatres that first existed as a super cinema, before being adapted into a theatrical space in the 1950s after the demand for cinemas declined. The Arts is the smallest West End theatre with a capacity of just 350 seats. This is 80 fewer seats than the next smallest, the Fortune, which seats 430, and a whopping 1,978 seats fewer than the West End theatre with the biggest capacity, the one we just spoke about, the Apollo Victoria, with 2,328 seats. That's a lot of people to see Wicked. The musical Chicago and the Cambridge Theatre go way back. The musical premiered at this theatre in 1979 after a season in Sheffield. A revival then opened in 1997, but 9 years later it transferred back into the Cambridge and played at this venue until 2011. Last year, the Criterion Theatre celebrated 150 years in the West End. The venue was first opened on the 21st of March, 1874, with Topsy-Turvydom being one of the first pieces to be performed in this theatre. This is a piece written by W.S. Gilbert. And if that name sounds familiar, it is because he is half of the writing duo Gilbert and Sullivan, well known for many of their iconic operas and musicals, including Pirates of Penzance. The Dominion Theatre has had many an iconic marquee, but nothing beats the 20-foot-tall Freddie Mercury statue that stood proudly upon the building's marquee until We Will Rock You closed in 2014. This statue now belongs to Queen's drummer Roger Taylor and sits in his garden to the very public dismay of his neighbours. In 1930, the Duchess Theatre became home to the shortest run in West End history. If you look at some shows now and think they flopped, the Intimate Review managed to close at the Duchess without even finishing its first performance. While primarily a house for plays, the Duke of York's Theatre is no stranger to a musical. Back in 2007, not only was the theatre home to a revival of Little Shop of Horrors, but also to a strange, reworked version of Rent, known as Rent Remixed. This version tried to modernise Rent, with several decisions being made that sound interesting. Moving the setting to 2007, reorchestrating the score, rearranging songs, and most randomly, making several of the characters British. As you can imagine, this production was very negatively received, and yes, I do want to do a full video on this musical because it sounds fascinating. Operation Mincemeat is known for its dedicated fans, and this is no better exemplified than by the plaque dedicated to Hester Leggett, which can be seen in the foyer of the Fortune Theatre, the current West End home to Operation Mincemeat. Little was really known about Hester as the musical was being created, so fans of the musical managed to get in touch with MI5 to seek more information about Hester, and they succeeded. They managed to find out the true spelling of her surname and who exactly she worked for. The story of the fans' plight is now being adapted into a book called Finding Hester, which coincidentally is releasing the exact same week I'm making this video. It is likely already up on Amazon by the time this video comes out. Later this year, the producers will open at the Garrick Theatre in the West End. This will mean that both of Mel Brooks' musicals will have played at this theatre after the 2017 West End premiere of Young Frankenstein. Yes, this fact is really simple, I just quite enjoy it. It's clearly just a good venue for a musical comedy written by Mel Brooks. The Gielgud Theatre used to be the home of a theatre cat named Beerbomb. There's a lot of conflicting stories on how he came to live at the theatre, but cats did used to be more commonplace in theatres as a way to catch mice and other vermin. But Beerbomb had a reputation as being a bit of a diva. So much so that he started to walk on stage during productions at the Gielgud, often leading to actors having to improvise around a cat randomly walking onto stage. Despite this, he was very beloved in the theatre community, so much so that when he passed away, he received a front-page obituary in the stage newspaper. The first theatre cat to ever have this honour. Theatres often change their names, this is to be expected. However, due to the passing of Queen Elizabeth, the fact that both of the Victoria theatres are technically named after the road that they're on and not Queen Victoria, and the changing of the name of the Queen's Theatre, we now only have one West End venue named after a woman, and that is the Gillian Lynne, a beloved choreographer who is most known for her work on Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats, which first performed at the New London Theatre in 1981. The New London Theatre is known nowadays as the Gillian Lynne. The 2023 revival of Merrily We Roll Along, starring Daniel Radcliffe, Jonathan Groff and Lindsay Mendez, premiered in London 11 years prior at the Meir Chocolate Factory, before then transferring to the West End to the Harold Pinter Theatre. This production starred Jenna Russell, Damien Humbley, and Mark Umbers. And funnily enough, both the 2023 and the 2013 versions of this musical have been filmed for ProShots. There have been 4 different theatres on the site that we currently know as His Majesty's Theatre. The first 2 theatres both burnt down, the first due to a fire set deliberately on the roof in June 1789, and the second was caused by an overheated stove in 1867. They learnt their lesson for the third theatre and made it less susceptible to fire, but this building was quickly deemed outdated. And because of this, it was demolished with some surrounding buildings in 1892. Then, in 1897, the fourth and current theatre that we know today was built. The London Palladium Panto celebrates its 10th year in a row in 2025. This has been a staple of Christmas in the West End since 2016. Over the past 10 years, there are 3 performers who have done every single pantomime: Julian Clary, Paul Zerdin, and Nigel Havers. The Lyceum Theatre, currently home to The Lion King, is actually the first venue where Prince performed in the UK. This was back in 1981, while the venue was known as the Lyceum Ballroom. It wasn't until 1996 when this was renovated into the Lyceum Theatre that we know it as today. You'll notice that year, 1996, is printed onto the building, alongside the year 1834. That is the year that this current building reopened, after being redesigned after a fire broke out in the original theatre. In 1984, a revival of the play Loot performed at the Lyric Theatre. This production starred Leonard Rossiter. On the 5th of October, 1984, Rossiter was waiting to go on stage when he suffered from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and passed away, sat in his dressing room backstage. A revival of the musical Blood Brothers played at the Noel Coward Theatre back in 1988 when it used to be known as the Albury. But this revival led the musical into making Olivier Awards history. Let's take a walk down memory lane of the history of the Olivier Awards now, because the category that is currently known as Best New Musical used to be known as Musical of the Year and included any musical, whether they be new or a revival, until the introduction of a separate category in 1991. Because of this, Blood Brothers is the only musical to be nominated twice for Best New Musical at the Olivier Awards, by a technicality. And you know what? I love a technicality. There was a full decade where they simply could not stick to a name for the Novello Theatre. This was mostly down to a constant shift in ownership. The theatre originally opened as the Waldorf Theatre in 1905, matching the Waldorf Hotel at Neighbours. 4 years later, in 1909, it became the Strand Theatre under new owner J.A. Harrison. But only 2 years later, it changed again when the venue was bought by F.C. Whitney, now becoming the Whitney Theatre, which isn't vain at all, you know? Whitney's theatrical venture was not very successful, and again, 2 years later, he sold the theatre in 1913, with the name changing back to the Strand Theatre, finally bringing back some stability to the name of this venue, until 2005, when Cameron Mackintosh renamed it to the Novello after Ivor Novello, a composer who used to live in the flat above this theatre. The Palace Theatre has had many an iconic marquee over the years. From a giant cassette for Les Mis, an umbrella display for Singing in the Rain, a giant chalice for Spamalot, a drum for The Commitments, and a giant high heel for Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Devil Wears Prada, eat your heart out. Did I use this fun fact slot just to speak about marquees I really like at the Palace for the past few decades? No, why would you say that? Why would you say that? That's such a weird thing to say. It's just a shame that there is absolutely nothing playing at the Palace Theatre. It's been closed for 8 years. It's so sad. Someone please open a show there. I have 2 fun facts for the Phoenix, and I could not pick between them, so let's just do both. Funnily enough, these are both about spaces at the Phoenix. The first is about their newly built bar. As Stranger Things was preparing to enter the Phoenix Theatre, they did some well-needed renovations on that space. These actually included some new bars. They bought a row of shops that sat on Charing Cross Road and built a new bar space within the Phoenix Theatre. This space actually opens throughout the day, so if you need a space in central London to get some work done, this is a perfect place to go if you want to work while you're stared at by giant plush demogorgons from the merch stand. And our second Phoenix Theatre fact is actually about a space around the back of the Phoenix. Across from their stage door, there's a small gated garden. This is known very aptly as the Phoenix Garden. Towards the end of the run of Come From Away in London, they actually hosted a cookout in this garden for the cast and crew, and some fans who want a competition to come along, which is very fitting for a show all about community. Every year for the month of June, Moulin Rouge in the West End updates its marquee at the Piccadilly Theatre. In rainbow text beneath the huge red neon sign is the phrase "Everyone is welcome here," decked out in rainbow colours and the Pride Progress flag. Adding pride to the iconic mantra of truth, beauty, freedom, and love. The Playhouse Theatre has currently rebranded itself as the Kit Kat Club with its current production of Cabaret. This has seen the removal of the Playhouse branding from the theatre's marquee. However, there is one place where it still can be seen, and that is if you are arriving into Charing Cross Station by train. If you look towards the back of the Playhouse Theatre, you can still see the name printed along the back. Now, I love how silly I can make this fact, so hold on with me. The Prince Edward Theatre was named after Edward VIII, the king who famously abdicated the throne to his brother George, father of Elizabeth II, who is, in turn, the mother of the current Prince Edward. Are you confused already? How about we make it more confusing? Because when the theatre was named after Edward VIII, he was the Prince of Wales, which is also the name of another West End theatre, but that one is instead named after Edward VII, who himself was named after his maternal grandfather, Prince Edward, son of George III. And guess what? This Edward was named after another Edward who was the Duke of York, which, you guessed it, was the name of another West End theatre. Basically, what we've learned is that the royal family really needs to think of some new names. And speaking of the Prince of Wales, the owner of this theatre in 1941 was fined for screening the UK premiere of Charlie Chaplin's film The Great Dictator. This satirical film depicting Nazi Germany had been banned in many parts of Europe at the time, and the UK had a similar appeasement policy. This was made during the film's production, despite the fact that when the film released, the UK and Germany were at war as part of World War II. My Savoy facts are quite small and very simple, so I've just smushed two of them together. Did you know that the Savoy Theatre is the first public building in the world to have been completely lit by electricity? And in 1993, it was the home to the World Chess Championship. Sadly, however, I don't think this theatre has ever put on the musical chess, which I think is a real shame. There's some real cross-promotional activities that could be going on here. The Shaftesbury was the first West End home of the musical Hair. The original West End production opened in 1968, just months after the show had opened on Broadway. Even with this fast turnaround, the opening of the show was delayed to allow performances to start after the abolition of theatre censorship. This was to allow the show to remain uncensored and to include the nudity and profanity that existed in the Broadway version of the show. But my fun fact about this show is actually about the cast members, because this production of Hair starred both Richard O'Brien and Tim Curry. This was the first time that the pair met, and then they would go on to collaborate on the cult classic, The Rocky Horror Show. At Soho Place is the newest theatre as part of our 39 official West End venues. Being built in 2022, this is one of our most accessible West End theatres as well. At Soho Place exists on the site adjacent to that which once belonged to the Astoria Theatre. This venue was sadly closed in 2009 as part of the developmental plans for Crossrail. The Sondheim Theatre was previously known as the Queen's Theatre, dedicated to Queen Alexandra, with her portrait hung above the fireplace in the foyer. An original pitch for the name of the theatre was the Central, a name which was hated by playwright Bernard Shaw, who suggested it sounded like it were a criminal court or a railway terminal. Which does make me wonder what he would have thought of the name At Soho Place. The St. Martin's Theatre is home to the longest running production in the world. This is, of course, The Mousetrap, which has played in the West End for over 70 years, but as of filming this video in June 2025, it has only played 51 of those years at this specific theatre. It opened originally next door at the Ambassadors Theatre, and to keep their famous record intact, they moved theatres within one day, performing their final show at the Ambassadors on the Saturday, and then on the Monday, opening right next door. Which is even funnier to think about that level of dedication, and then remember that Les Mis closed for like 4 months. And even if you count the concert, there was closure time between them, meaning that they didn't have to go to those lengths in order to keep their record. Being the oldest West End theatre, there's so many fun facts that I could use for the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. It's home to many firsts in the world of theatre, but one of my favourites of these is actually fairly simple. The Theatre Royal Drury Lane was the first theatre in the world to install a safety curtain, doing so in 1794. These protect the audience in the event of a fire on stage, and knowing just how many theatres have burnt down from researching for this video, yeah, I kinda see why these were invented and why they're very important. The Theatre Royal Haymarket has a really interesting history of censorship. The theatre was home to a satire that upset the government at the time so much that they introduced the Licensing Act of 1737. This act made it a criminal offence for anyone to be associated with a theatre that did not hold a licence. The owner of the theatre at the time, Samuel Foote, managed to get around the restriction by inviting people to the theatre for hot chocolate, where a play would be performed at no extra charge. The Trafalgar Theatre we know today is much closer to how the theatre was originally built. Originally known as the Whitehall, this theatre was converted into a TV and radio studio in the 1990s, and then in 2004 into the Trafalgar Studios, which consisted of two different theatre spaces. The building's listed status meant that the changes made during that 2004 renovation had to be reversible, allowing us to finally go back to the one auditorium space that we know today. The Vaudeville Theatre was originally built behind two houses on the Strand. If you thought the foyer is small now, you used to have to walk through many small corridors to be able to reach the auditorium. These houses were demolished in 1889, building the entrance and the facades that we know and love today. A really iconic feature of the beautiful Victoria Palace is the golden statue of Anna Pavlova. This golden statue has been on the roof of the theatre since 2006, but it's actually a replica of a statue that was featured on the building when it opened in 1911. In order to protect it during World War II, it was taken off of the building, but they lost the statue during this time. So much for safekeeping. And finally, we have the Wyndham's Theatre, currently home to My Master Builder. This is a play that's been directed by previous artistic director of the Donmar Warehouse, Michael Grandage. But he has a really interesting history with a link between both of these theatres. Back in 2008, Grandage took charge of a 12-month season of productions at this theatre known as Donmar West End. Some of the productions that played at the Wyndhams at this time included Derek Jacobi in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night and Kenneth Branagh in Chekhov's Ivanov. But that is one fun fact about every West End theatre. What's your favourite West End venue? Do you have any fun facts that I didn't mention in this video? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. And let me know if you want to see some more videos like this. Maybe a fun fact about every musical in the West End right now. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me. It helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. I also have other social links and a merch store in the description down below. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.